Sue, what are you looking at?
Oh, Chris, how are you doing? Are you all right too?
All right, yeah.
The Acklam plan. Have you never seen it before?
Do you know, I have vaguely, but I've not really had a good look at it before, so...
Well, what I'm looking at specifically is where I live. And while we've been in lockdown, I've had the opportunity to find out loads and loads of really good information about where I live.
Well, where do you live then?
Linthorpe.
Oh.
And do you know what? It is so clear on the Acklam map.
You're joking me.
See this little road here?
Oh my goodness.
This is 1716.
Wow.
Bearing in mind, I didn't even know that Linthorpe existed in 1716.
Goodness me.
So I've done loads of research. It's been brilliant. I've really enjoyed doing it.
Do you know, it's funny you should say that, but I've been looking in the Teesside archives, looking at some of the history of Middlesbrough, and I have found a little bit of material about Linthorpe. So maybe we can put our information together, our knowledge,
Oh,
our
that
heads
sounds
together.
fantastic. Do you fancy going and doing a trail?
Oh yes, please.
Chronologically, looking at the changes in Linthorpe, all the stuff I've learned, because I'm really excited to share it with people.
Brilliant, yeah, that sounds really good.
We're going to start off at the top end of Burlham Road.
Oh
So
yeah,
we should make our way there then.
Yeah, let's get going.
Oh, well, that didn't take us very long, Chris.
No.
It's about 20 minutes walk from the museum.
Fast walkers though, we're fit.
We are.
Yeah.
And this is it. This is the old village of Linthorpe, or the start of it here.
Really?
I know, and if you look at it now, it's so built up and looks so suburban. But you've got to imagine what it would have looked like. It would have been idyllic.
Would it?
So beautiful. The little pictures that we've got of it show it to be really lovely. And if you saw it on the map, it didn't have a high street.
Oh,
It was a green, and the green, if we go down
like
Burlham Road now, which is the top of Burlham Road, this is Acklam just over here.
Oh yeah.
And all of that road, right the way to Roman Road, was the old Linthorpe village.
What we could see on the map back in the
Yeah,
museum?
that's that road that goes down there.
Gosh, I never realised.
So in 1716, when we saw that map, what would have been around here? One of the things that I think has changed so much that we don't recognise is our river. And you would have been able to see the river from here.
Of course, it was before the cuts, wasn't it?
Just where the A19 is, that is where the river would have been. So it would have been like 5 minutes walk to the river.
Yeah, really handy.
And if you turn in this direction, you would have went down towards Newport, where you went the ferry over to Stockton.
Across the river,
So the Acklam Road was quite a well-used road to the port. And just beyond it, where Ayrsham School is, there was Archibald School, there was a farm, Ayrsham Farm.
Right.
So this would have just been a row of houses with rolling countryside.
Just farms
around
and
it.
animals and fields and woods
Absolutely.
and orchards.
So what was it like then? What was in the village itself? Let's think about what I can remember. There wasn't a church.
Oh, right.
But people would have it was still like a community feel to it. And the green, you would have been able to graze your cattle on.
Oh, wow.
I know.
Right.
But if you had grazing cattle, you needed somewhere for them to drink.
Yeah.
There was a pond and a draw well as well.
Oh, right.
Now,
So
I wondered what a draw well was at first, but it's a well that you get
you
water
wind
from.
it up? Oh, wow, like a wishing well.
Absolutely. And a pinfold.
Right.
Now, you'll know what a pinfold is.
It's like walls, isn't it? Like an enclosure.
An enclosure for the animals,
yeah.
And I've got some names here of that brought me notes. I want to share this information with everybody, but I can't remember it all. So the plots that the people lived in were called such romantic names. Hob Nook.
Oh, wow.
I want to live in a house called Slipper Skins. That sounds lovely. And the Applegarth. And these would have been dotted all the way along both sides of the green.
Wow. Yeah.
And as we head towards the opposite end, we would have come to the main building, which is where we're going to walk to next. The building was known as Blue Hall.
I've heard of that. Yes.
And it was quite a substantial building. It was a grand home.
Yeah.
So if we head towards Roman Road,
Right.
and imagine that we're moving through time to about the 1840s at the complete opposite end of Burlham Road. So we've walked the length of the village green.
Oh my goodness, right.
So what was at this end? Rose Cottage here is probably the oldest building in Linthorpe.
Really?
And it's part of the original Blue Hall estate. And right next door to it was a beautiful grand home.
Right.
Built sometime in the 1700s.
Yeah.
Remember, I'm no historian. It's just a little bit of research that I've done and that I want to share. And it was a substantial building, 3 stories, south facing, lovely big windows.
Nice, yeah.
on a little estate here.
Yeah.
So this would have been a park there. There was orchards all around.
Yeah.
And a couple of facts that I found out about it that I thought we needed to share was it was reputed to be frequented by smugglers from Newport.
Nice one. Yeah.
And even more interesting, was rumoured to have a subterranean tunnel going somewhere, but that's actually never actually been proven.
I like the story. We should keep with the story, really, shouldn't we? So.
but did you find out some interesting facts out?
Well, I did. I had a little look in this booklet, and I found out. I mean, this kind of goes a bit further back, I guess. Dick Turpin, the highwayman, he had some kind of rendezvous around here. I mean, he's a bit like King Arthur. He gets everywhere, I think. So I don't know how to
painting a picture of this first
very
hall.
interesting, very lively, isn't it?
It is. But it was up. The first hall was only in existence until about the 1870s, and it was demolished and rebuilt. But funny enough, we don't have in the Drama Museum any pictures of the second.
I can't find anything about it.
Oh, well, hopefully anybody who's watches this film, if they've got any pictures of Blue Hall from 1870 onwards, up in the garden with them.
Yeah.
We'll have a cup of tea with you to say thank you if you bring them. So what else was around here? There was already an existing Quaker burial, which was just out the back of the hall itself. But the development of the port and then the find of the iron ore in the 50s totally changed the look.
Yeah.
And the movers and shakers of Middlesbrough started to move south with the building.
Right.
And at the time, Middlesbrough was about 3 miles away. Where we think of Middlesbrough today isn't where the original Middlesbrough was. It was further back. We always think of the town centre being where Boots is, you know, where you go shopping. But that's not the original town. It was further away.
Right.
So this was like 3 miles away, and they were heading in this direction. And by the 1860s, the area changed massively when they built the cemetery. So we're going to walk now down Roman Road, and we're going to park ourselves on St Barnabas, and we're going to take a look at what was happening in the 1850s and 60s in Linthorpe. So here we are, Chris, on New Cemetery Road.
It's got St Barnabas on it.
It is now, but it originally was known as New Cemetery Road. It didn't get its new name until I think it was about 1911.
Right.
Don't quote me on that, but it was around that time that we got it. So why do you think it was called originally New Cemetery?
The cemetery at Linthorpe.
Absolutely. Yeah. This road went in when the cemetery went in, and the cemetery went in 1868.
Right, okay.
Now, thinking about old Linthorpe now, imagine what that's like now. This was a idyllic country, rural location, and now smack behind you is a cemetery. And the new village is starting to emerge. The old village is there, but Middlesbrough movers and shakers have decided to really develop Linthorpe, and there's a reason for it. In 1850, they started to open something that really complemented Middlesbrough.
Right.
It was brickworks.
Oh, of course.
Now, I live in Linthorpe, and I dig my garden. After 6 inches of topsoil, I hit clay. What do you make out of clay? Bricks. Absolutely. So this, and what is growing? The town. What a compliment to the town to have an area just up the road producing bricks. Perfect. So you had brick factories. You had the Sun Brick Factory that was just over the way where we came from, just at the other side of Thurland Road.
Right.
Doherty's Brick Factory would have just been the other side of the wreck. This is where we stood here. And behind what is now Park Hotel, there was another brickyard, and in Linthorpe there was almost 30 different brickyards.
Good grief.
Producing bricks to build our town.
Goodness me.
And do you ever wonder why, when they developed this area?
I've always wondered why this is open.
Little park.
Park. When it's all built around it. So
this is one of the clay pits that they would have dug the clay from
Right, of
and
course.
used the clay
Right.
to build the houses.
Right.
So we're in the 1860s. Middlesbrough has had this grand idea to really develop Linthorpe, and it's building houses for the people that are going to be working in the brick factories.
Yeah.
So the first houses that we're going to approach here are your 2 up, 2 downs
Right.
of Oliver Street, Simpson Street, Stonehouse Street,
Okay.
that were built for your working men.
Right. Working
But
class.
things are starting to change. So let's head down New Cemetery Road and head towards the end of the 60s,
Right.
towards the 1870s. So we're at the top end now of New Cemetery Road, and we're in the 1860s. And if you look behind you, Chris,
Oh yeah.
you can see the style of working men's house.
These are beautiful, I think.
They are
Really
lovely,
yeah.
but there's quite a good indicator that they were built before sanitation in houses.
Oh, right.
I was speaking to a local historian, bearing in mind I'm not a historian, and her name was Jenny, and she was telling me that when you see houses like these ones here,
Yeah.
and there are door,
Right.
window, door, window, door, window, that's an indicator that they didn't have any sanitary or indoor plumbing, nothing.
Oh, right.
Because when they did introduce indoor plumbing, you put the kitchens together, the bathrooms together, and the front doors together. So you'd have 2 doors
and then
2 windows.
Ah, right.
So these houses here would have had the night soil man visit their garden.
That doesn't sound very nice.
Well, do you know what? Right, I'll just let you use your imagination to what he would have
What he
done.
was collecting.
Yes, bearing in mind the toilet would have been in the back garden of those houses.
Yes.
And just the other side of the houses would have been still some of the original cottages from the estate that was the old village.
Yeah.
And in the 1850s, I'm not quite sure of the date, an energetic young vicar from Newport got together some money to build a church because he recognised that the growing...
Not this one.
Not this one, no, this isn't the original one. This one didn't come about until about the 1890s. And it was because Linthorpe was growing, and the population of Linthorpe had to walk all the way to Newport to go to church.
It's a long way then.
So he built a new church just along the way here, and I'm not quite sure of the exact spot of it, but we do have a picture to show it. So we're at the 1860s, and we're going to move into the 1870s, and this is when Linthorpe really changes.
Right.
If you look in this direction, you can see the Park Hotel has just recently been built, same year as the road. But if you head towards the town, there is a row of houses that show the change in the thought of the development of Linthorpe. This is not like bog standard homes, but the businessmen who were moving into Middlesbrough, they wanted the middle classes. They wanted a superior residence, and they started to build beautiful villas to accommodate the middle classes in Middlesbrough. And one of the first places that went up was Emerson Terrace, which is now incorporated into Linthorpe Road.
Do you know what? I found something about that. Yeah,
I know you had a
There's an advert about the actual houses that were built, and it's titled Capital Family Residence. And just get this, listen to this for the list of rooms. You've got a drawing room, you've got a dining room, you've got a kitchen, a sitting room, 5 bedrooms, a cellar kitchen, a WC, toilet, a wine cellar,
ooh la la,
a stable coach house, and good gardens. I mean, it's absolutely massive. It's so much different, so different from the working class housing.
There was the change. Middlesbrough had been started to really develop. Our town grew faster than any other town in the whole world, I think, at one point. And we started to get more business people approaching the town, and they developed the Linthorpe Road. And firstly, it was developed with houses, but within 10, 15 years, premises were being turned into businesses because it was much more lucrative to have a shop along there. So you were building down towards an area out of the grime and the smoke.
All the industry.
You have your beautiful park, your green lung right on your doorstep, and all this beautiful open lands with a small village, a new village emerging. So the change started to take place. So let's go now to the 1870s, where you can see some of the new buildings that were coming up. But I'm hoping that everyone recognises the top end of the Linthorpe Road where it meets the avenue. And we've come forward to the late 1870s. So Middlesbrough has decided to build lots of lovely big houses for the middle classes, and they're going to do that in Linthorpe. And as you look at the end of the avenue and back on itself, you will see gorgeous big villas. Make those Emerson Terrace look like
pale and insignificant.
Absolutely, in comparison. These are houses really for businessmen with lots of money. Along that area there, I think we had something like 4 of the local mayors during about a 20-year period lived in them houses there. But if you step back and you look at what the Linthorpe village, which was what was supposed to be developed, would have looked like, you would have had a lot of the houses would have still been residential, and they would have had little front gardens. There was the pond. The central didn't look anything like it looks today. It was built in, I think it was the 1850s by Thomas Sainsbury, I think it was, but don't quote me on that. And then you've got your Park Hotel at the other end there. But it would have had, by now, some of the houses would have started to get converted to businesses. So you would have had your grocers, you would have had a post office. Like I say, I think there was a little pond in amongst it. But there was a little blip in time between those houses that were for the working class being built and some of the villas. And it was because in Middlesbrough, in the 1870s, there was a recession. Did you know that? We had a recession about 10 years ago, but that's not the first. And the iron and steel industry went through this period where it was, I think it was between iron being produced and then steel, where we weren't selling our goods. And this had a massive knock-on effect to the local businesses, one of them being the brickworks. Now, we didn't really talk a lot about some of the buildings that were going up in that area that affected Old Linthorpe. We talked about moving down towards the 1850s, but we're in the 1870s now. And this recession hit the brickworks, and they weren't selling any of the bricks. If you're not building anything, no one's buying your bricks. What do you do with your brickyard? Well, John Harrison, who owned one of the local brickyards, had a brilliant idea. And he got into cahoots with Dr. Christopher Dresser.
I recognise that name.
And he turned his brickyard into Linthorpe Pottery. So let's take a look from this point here, back over at what developed in that area in the 1870s, because it's still a little village, but we've now got a horrible cemetery encroaching onto it. A fever hospital is added. Man, you know, if I'm living in an old village, I don't really want a fever hospital. Then on its corner is an industrial school, basically a school for naughty boys. And just up the way at the top of New Cemetery Road is the workhouse.
So when you're really badly off.
Absolutely. So they're not your Victorian villas. Now, this isn't a historical accurate to it, based around how things were word for word. This is my approach to it. My approach to it is if I lived in Old Linthorpe Village, right, and I had all that round me, I'd want to move to the new fancy villas. So we're going to take a look to the 1880s, and we're going to go down the Crescent, and we're going to sit ourselves, I think, at the junction of Roman Road and the Crescent, and take a little look at how desirable the area is becoming. People walk up the Crescent and they do not see the houses that are there. They look like business premises now, but these were built as homes for the aspirational homeowner, people who wanted to live in beautiful big homes. And the view from those houses would have just been over all of of this would have just been fields still in the 1880s.
Still quite rural. Yeah.
Apart from this one building here, which was built for a pawnbroker. I think it was the town pawnbroker. I'm not quite sure of his name. I think it might have been Wilkes, but don't quote me on that. Have you got any information about it?
Do you know, I think it was Wilkes. Is it Joseph Wilkes?
He didn't live here for very long.
Yeah.
He only lived here for a while, and then it became the doctor's, the local surgeon's residency. And of the houses that were built along here, they were just dotted in and out. We'll take a little look at this map here.
Okay.
Can you see the old village here?
Yeah.
And then you go up the street we went up, the New Cemetery Road, and then you get to the new village here.
Yeah.
And here you can see where we've walked down to the crescent.
Yeah.
Take a look at the sizes of the houses that were built for the working men, and then look at the size of the plots that were built
4 or 5 times bigger, aren't
Absolutely, you can get a street in there.
Exactly,
and they weren't all occupied straight away. And of the first residents that moved there, quite a few moved out quite quickly. And I wondered what made that change.
Yeah.
So I had a look what was happening, and one of the things that was happening in Linthorpe at the time was Mr. Oliver had a brilliant idea when he built his hotel, the Park Hotel. He put on a tram service. It was like a little bus service to start with, and then it was a horse-drawn tram. But in 1898, it was an electric tram, and it came right the way up to the junction here.
That'd have been quite noisy.
I reckon if I'd have lived on the Crescent and they'd have put a tram system in front of my beautiful view, it would have put me off a bit, and I might have sold up, because it must have been the equivalent of having a motorway on your front.
It's pretty full on,
But some people would have seen it as a bonus.
Yeah.
And this area here now was being advertised as an absolute desirable area to live. So let's take a little look. I made a list of why it would be such a good place to move here. You've got the houses that are being converted to shops in the village just on your doorstep, and more shops coming around, so you didn't have to go far from the shops.
Yeah.
You had the new church that's just been built up the road, so you didn't have far to go.
Yeah.
You've got the tram on your doorstep that's going to take you to the town. It's a penny a mile to go on the tram. There's a local doctors, the police station's there, and a new school has just gone up over the road. So this is prime family location. So it's for the savvy investor as well. So people are starting to look at Linthorpe for investments. And the next stop that we're going to go to is where one of those savvy investors built some beautiful, desirable, upmarket homes. And we're going to head towards Phillipsville, just round the corner.
Right, where have you taken us to now then, Sue? This feels very different.
I've brought you to 1899.
Wow.
And Phillipsville.
Right.
Now, I know you already know a little bit about Phillipsville, because we've had this chat before.
We have,
And a local, very astute businessman had this idea to develop this area.
What was his name, Sue?
I can't say his name, because I can't say it because I've got a short tongue. What's he called?
Theophilus Phillips. There you go.
There you go. It's a bit of a mouthful,
isn't it? It is a bit, isn't it? Yeah.
So he had this vision for the area, but mostly it was a vehicle for self-promotion. He was a bit of a man who wanted to be noticed in the town. And he wanted to make this area the most desirable area of Linthorpe. And if you live here, like I do, like I say, I've learned loads about where I live. This is still extremely desirable. And what's so nice about it is it's maintained its Victorian integrity. It still has that lovely suburban, quiet feel to it, apart from somebody still with a bit of work there in the background.
A bit of grinding or something.
But his vision was very big. He even had an idea to incorporate into this area a grand tea rooms and assembly rooms, but the whole vision didn't happen. So what happened is he got in cahoots with a local architect, Arthur Newsom. Newsomville just doesn't have the same ring, does it?
No, it doesn't trip off the tongue really, does it?
And he wanted to develop this as aspirational living. And the houses, when they were built, had a lower end price. They could not be priced less than £250 for a semi, or £300 for...
So it had a minimum price.
For a detached house. Because he wanted to be very exclusive.
Right.
And he didn't completely fulfil his vision. because I think he had some sort of personal sort of scandal
Yeah.
going on, and he didn't get to finish his the
Right.
whole area, but he did complete quite a lot of it. And what's quite interesting is the avenues that come off it. It's Claude Avenue and Maybury.
Yeah.
These are all family names that belong to the Phillips family as well. So
Right.
it kind of like, can you see that self-promotion?
He stamped his own mark, didn't he, on the area? Yeah.
But what he really did was he opened his eyes, the eyes of investors from far afield, to what a lucrative prospect buying in Linthorpe was.
Yeah.
And plots started to sell from Cambridge Road and Oxford Road, Thornfield Road, on the market in auction houses down in London and far and wide.
Wow.
So we've come from the 1760, the old Linthorpe, and we've come right up to really when I think we should maybe stop around here, because this is when Linthorpe really was at its best.
Yeah.
So the question is,
But what happened to the old village though, Sue?
that's the question.
Is it?
It is. What happened to the old village of Linthorpe? Well, it was still there.
Right.
But it was kind of like just assimilated into the new village.
Right.
You think about it,
Yeah.
as the new village rippled in growth towards it, as it got to the houses that were there.
Yeah.
If there weren't a good enough structure, there would have been knocked out and new ones built.
It was replaced.
And they extended the cemetery a little bit as well.
Right, yeah.
The green had a road built there as well, so it just became part of the new village.
Yeah.
And it kind of lost its identity.
Right, yeah.
Which is a shame, because the idea of having a lovely little rural location just that far outside of the town would have been nice.
Yeah.
So, if anybody wants to do this trail,
Yeah.
you can download it as a map from the Love Middlesbrough webpage during History Month in May.
In May, brilliant.
And it comes with lots of information about significant buildings as well.
Fantastic.
So,
Sounds
if you want to
good.
have another go at walking it,
Yes,
it's
please.
less than an hour.